Welcome to the West Rock Fernandina Beach Mill. The purpose of this program is to communicate safe work practices for contractor personnel performing work at the mill. We believe that all injuries are preventable and that everyone is responsible for ensuring safety at all times. This program is an overview of our safe work practices and is not all-inclusive. Contract workers are required to follow all OSHA regulations as well as West Rock's policies and procedures. Contractors will hold a minimum of one safety meeting per week. Documentation records showing topics and attendees are to be made available to the mill safety manager upon request. Gate 1 is the entry point for log trucks and chip trucks. Gate 5 is the entry point for everything else that comes into the mill. Contractors will enter the mill through Gate 4. Only vehicles necessary for contracted work are permitted to enter the mill. All personal vehicles must be parked outside the gate. Contractor Gates 1, 4, and 5 are open 24 hours a day. During the annual outage, Gates 4, 6, and 8 open at 5:30 a.m. and close at 8 a.m. They open again at 4:30 p.m. and close at 8 p.m. If you're allowed to bring your vehicle on site for work purposes, security will issue a day pass. Display this pass on your windshield. Vehicles that are permitted to enter the mill must be clearly marked with the company name on both sides. Each contractor is required to sign in and out with security each time they enter and leave the mill, so everyone can be accounted for in the event of an emergency. Property passes are required for removing tools, material, and/or equipment from Rock 10 property. This pass must be given to security when the items are removed from the mill site. All vehicles, lunchboxes, and carryout items are subject to search when entering or exiting the mill. Seat belts must be worn by everyone riding in a vehicle if it's designed with seat belts. When driving in the mill, obey all warning signs. Do not exceed the maximum speed limit of 10 miles per hour. Vehicles from very small to very large are present in the mill. If you're in a small vehicle in an area where heavy machinery is operating, use extreme caution as you may not be seen. Park your vehicle in designated parking areas. Do not block roadways or access to safety or emergency equipment. All vehicles parked inside the mill must have the keys left in the ignition with the doors unlocked if left unattended, in case the vehicle needs to be moved because of an emergency. Passengers transported in the rear of pickup trucks are to be seated completely inside the bed of the pickup. Riding on the side or on the tailgate is prohibited. Diesel and gasoline fuel tanks are strictly off limits to contractors unless you're issued a fuel tag by your mill representative. This tag must be affixed to the vehicle. Rail traffic is normal throughout the mill. Many of the main train crossings on site do not have the typical railroad crossing arms or gates that halt vehicle traffic. So watch closely for train movement or lights and listen for warning horns or train whistles. Do not walk between rail cars that are less than 50 feet apart, and never attempt to crawl through or under a stopped rail car, as they can move without warning. No work is to be done near or on railroad tracks without first contacting your mill representative to assure the blue flag and other necessary warning procedures are in place. Personal protective equipment, PPE, required gate to gate includes a hard hat, safety glasses with side shields, steel-toed safety footwear, and hearing protection in high noise areas. Signs are posted in these areas. Safety glasses with dark lenses may be worn when working outside during daylight hours, but glasses with clear lenses are required anytime you work in an area with an overhead cover, inside a building, or at night. Wear the appropriate gloves to protect your hands. Cut-resistant gloves are required when handling rough, sharp, or abrasive material. Neoprene gloves are required when handling chemicals or corrosive liquids. Gloves must not be used near moving or rotating parts, in running nip points, or other hazardous areas. Rings are not permitted to be worn in the mill. Bracelets or dangling jewelry are not permitted to be worn around machinery. Hair shoulder length or longer must be contained under a hard hat or in a similar fashion when you're working around rotating equipment. Only those who've been trained and fit tested may use a respirator. Additional PPE may be required depending on the job you're performing. Contractors must supply all personal protective equipment and enforce compliance. Proper dress for contractors include shirts with sleeves covering the shoulders and upper body and ankle-length pants. Smoking is permitted in designated outdoor areas only. Smoking is not permitted in any building or within 25 feet of any entrance or common walkway. Dispose of cigarette butts in the containers provided. Contractors are permitted to eat in the mill cafeteria except between the hours of 11:45 and 12:30. This time is reserved for mill employees. If you're operating a mobile communication device, stop in a safe area, conduct your business, and then carry on. Do not walk and talk or text at the same time. Cameras are not allowed in the facility without management authorization. You're not authorized to use any camera, including a cell phone camera, inside the mill. Weapons, fighting, gambling, or horseplay are strictly forbidden at all times on the mill site. Contractors are not permitted to possess or report to work under the influence of controlled substances, alcohol, or illegal drugs. Contractors must be able to provide proof of drug testing within the last 12 months where the results were negative. Our production processes involve the use of high-speed equipment and some equipment that can start automatically. Obey warning signs and never reach into or touch any equipment, whether it's running or not. Be careful of uneven, wet, and slippery surfaces throughout the mill. When going up and coming down stairs, maintain 3 points of contact and take one step at a time. Do not skip steps. Conveyors are used to move finished goods. Never step or walk onto a conveyor. They can start automatically and without warning. As you travel through the mill, use extra caution at doorways, step-outs, and blind corners, and listen for backup alarms and horns. Make eye contact with the mobile equipment operator before you attempt to take the right-of-way. Do not assume the driver knows you're there. Riders are not allowed on any mobile equipment that's not designated for passengers. All barricades do not look alike, but all of them are in place as a warning to stay out of an area. Yellow tape indicates an area where caution should be taken. Red tape indicates an area where danger is present. A sign must be attached to the barricade tape indicating the reason for the barricade. Do not enter a barricaded area unless you're authorized to do so. Housekeeping is an important contractor responsibility. You're expected to keep your work area clean and orderly. Roll cords and hoses up and store them properly when not in use. Do not block aisles, exits, emergency equipment, or electrical panels. Food waste goes in containers marked as trash only. Dispose of oily rags in red barrel storage containers. Place other waste items in their marked containers. Any and all residual chemicals brought on site by contractors for a job must be removed from the mill after completion of the job. It's illegal to throw aerosol cans with any contents remaining in them into the trash. There are aerosol puncturing stations in the mill and on Contractor Hill to drain any minor residue from aerosol cans prior to their disposal. These stations are for draining cans with broken triggers and cans from which all usable material has been used. Do not place any aerosol cans that are still usable into these units. Aerosol cans may be disposed of in one of the scrap metal bins only after they've been punctured and emptied. Inspect all tools before using. Defective tools should be removed from service immediately. Never use tools for other than their intended purpose. 110-volt AC electric power tools must be double insulated or have a UL-approved grounded 3-wire system. Ground fault circuit interrupters, GFCIs, are required when working with any electric tools and are to be used at the source only. GFCIs are also required when working inside a confined space where lights and other electrical equipment are utilized. Portable grinding tools need to be equipped with safety guards to protect workers not only from the moving wheel surface, but also from flying fragments in case of breakage. Compressed air shall not be used to dust off your face, hands, or clothing. Compressed air can cause serious injury if it's not used properly. Air used for blowdown purposes must be reduced to a maximum of 30 psi. Goggles and a face shield must be worn when using compressed air. Acetylene and other compressed gas cylinders must be stored in an upright position and securely fastened in sturdy storage racks. Protective caps must be secured on all stored cylinders not in use. Segregate full and empty containers. Oxygen must be stored at a minimum of 20 feet from fuel gases or combustible materials. All contractors must wear fall protection when working from any non-permanent elevated surface 4 feet or more off the ground. WestRock requires a 100% tie-off, and we recommend retractable lanyards. When working from a lift basket, safety harnesses will be attached to the lift basket rather than fixed structures or buildings. A groundman must be present and have immediate access to controls when the lift is in use. Barricade the area below overhead work. Do not operate any lifting equipment within 10 feet of any energized power lines. Do not walk under overhead work or suspended loads. Ladders should be inspected prior to each use, and deficient ladders should be removed from service. Step ladders must be fully open before climbing. Never use the top 2 steps of a step ladder or the top 3 rungs of an extension ladder. All ladders must conform to OSHA standards and requirements for each specific application. Fiberglass ladders are permitted to be used. Wood or metal ladders are not permitted on mill property. When using an extension ladder, make sure the ladder extends 3 feet above the surface it comes to rest on. Extension ladders should be erected at a 4-to-1 ratio. A good way to get the right angle is to lean the ladder against the area you wish to climb. Place your feet at the base of the ladder with your toes touching the ladder feet. Then reach out and grab the side rails with your hands. The rails should be at arm's reach. Once the ladder is in place, use the buddy system to climb the ladder and tie it off to prevent slipping. Any scaffold erected must conform to OSHA safety and health standards. Scaffolds must be inspected and tagged before each shift. If the scaffold is fully decked and has all handrails and toe boards, it will have a green tag. If the scaffold cannot be fully completed due to obstructions, then fall protection will be required and a yellow tag will be hung. Red tag scaffolds are not to be used. Scaffolding over 6 feet in height requires complete decking, guardrails, toe boards, and a full body harness. An access ladder must be provided for all scaffolds. Climbing the side of scaffolding is not permitted. Only trained and certified personnel are allowed to ride the belt-type vertical man lift in the number 5 power boiler building. No tools, materials, or equipment are allowed to be carried by a person on the belt man lift or placed on an unattended step. All work in a vessel or confined space is governed by OSHA's Confined Space Standard. Compliance and training is the responsibility of the contractor. A confined space entry permit must be present at the point of entry. The contractor must supply a qualified attendant at the entry point to continuously monitor the entrance in the confined space. All entrants to the space must wear a safety harness with a tagline. The attendant is not to enter the space for any reason. The attendant is responsible for sounding the alarm in the event of an emergency. Motor control centers are off limits to contractors, unless their work specifically requires them to enter an MCC. Mill-authorized personnel will perform the initial lockout. Confirm that all energy is at a zero energy state. And verify that the equipment will not start. Contractors should make sure the yellow supervisor's lock is on the lockbox before they place their personal lock. Group lockouts are used when more than one energy isolation device is involved in achieving a zero energy state. Contractors are responsible for supplying their own locks and tags. Be sure to remove your lock when the work is finished. A hot work permit is required before any work begins where an arc, spark, open flame, or other ignition-producing equipment is used. Hot work permits will be kept in the immediate vicinity of the work. Fire blankets are required whenever combustible material is located below or adjacent to the hot work area. The contractor shall provide a qualified, non-working employee whose sole responsibility is to act as a fire watch during hot work. The fire watch must have a fire extinguisher or charged fire hose while hot work is being performed. Face shields are required when cutting and grinding. A welding hood, body protection, and gloves must be worn when welding. Do not throw welding electro stubs on the ground. Deposit them in a metal container for safe disposal. In areas where welding activities are taking place adjacent to walkways and passageways, a welding screen must be erected. All trenching and excavations will follow the WestRock excavation and trenching procedure or an equally stringent policy. All contractors will employ a trenching and excavation competent person prior to digging on WestRock property. Excavations must be barricaded off and permitted prior to digging. Safety data sheets for all chemicals stored or used at the Fernandina Mill can be found on chemical totes and are also available for review on any mill computer. SDS contain information concerning immediate first aid instructions, product spillage, and proper handling. Any chemical brought onto the mill site by a contractor must be accompanied by an SDS and must be approved by the safety manager prior to being brought on site. There are numerous chemicals stored and utilized in the various processes around the mill. Our storage tanks and containers are labeled or tagged noting the contents as per the requirements of the Hazard Communication Standard. All paints, solvents, and other flammable liquids must be stored in a flammable storage cabinet and must be properly labeled in compliance with the Hazard Communication Standard. Warning signs for radiation sources are posted at each source. Any incident involving radiation sources is to be reported immediately. No one is permitted to touch any insulation except trained certified insulators. At the Fernandina Beach Mill, the turpentine system is a covered process under the PSM standard due to its flammability and because more than 10,000 pounds are stored in the turpentine decanter and storage tank. Surrounding the turpentine decanter and storage tank area is a PSM yellow boundary line. Activities are restricted in this area. Contact your mill representative if the scope of work you'll be performing requires any activity within the boundary area. A personal H2S monitor is required for contractor employees working in the tall oil plant or waste treatment grit chamber, or anywhere there's a permanent H2S monitor. Liquid oxygen for use in the waste treatment system is manufactured in the O2 plant. Access to the fenced area surrounding the oxygen plant is restricted. You're required to have specific training to work within the boundary area of the O2 plant. Smoking is prohibited around the UNOX waste treatment plant and the oxygen plant. The shipping department and the recycle plant are restricted areas. Because mobile equipment traffic is very heavy in both areas, pedestrian traffic is discouraged and vehicle traffic is prohibited. You're required to wear a high visibility vest when you're in either area. Contractors working in these areas are not required to sign in and out. Red lights and buzzers in the shipping department warn you that a fork truck is moving on the roadway. Do not cross the road when the light is on. Access to both recovery boilers is restricted. All contractors must report to the respective boiler control room located on the 3rd floor of each boiler before entering any other area of the boiler, and must also check out at the control room when leaving. Contractors are not allowed to use the area under the recovery boilers for any purpose. In the event of an unstable operating condition, these areas can be very dangerous. The recovery boiler ESP alarm is used to sound the alert if the recovery boiler has commenced emergency shutdown procedures. This alarm is tested every morning at 8 a.m. If the siren sounds at any other time or continues to sound at 8 a.m., consider it an emergency and evacuate the area as fast as possible. If an evacuation is called for, emergency assembly areas are at the gates. To report any emergency, dial 5911 from any mill phone or use channel 1 on any mill radio. From a non-mill phone, dial 261-5551 to reach the main guardhouse. When reporting an emergency, give your name, the nature of the emergency, and the emergency contact point nearest your location. There are 12 emergency contact points in the mill. These are located at the main gate, the southeast corner of the box plant, the southwest corner of the shipping department, in new chip receiving, at the maintenance shop in the woodyard, on the outside road northeast of chip storage, north of the mill water cooling tower, north of the Kmere, at the southeast corner of the warehouse, at the east gate, at the O2 plant, and south of the Unox plant. To aid emergency responders, turn the light on and stay in the area until help arrives. The Fernandino Beach Fire and Rescue Department will be called to provide emergency assistance and transportation if needed. Contractors are required to provide first aid for their employees. Mill medical facilities are available for use on an emergency basis only. All incidents are required to be reported immediately and will be investigated. The mill has first responders and automated emergency defibrillators, or AEDs, available at all times in the event of a medical emergency. Additional safety equipment located throughout the mill includes eye wash stations and showers, escape respirators, and firefighting equipment. Mill fire water cannot be used without a permit issued by the Powerhouse Central Control Room. Local alarms for hydrogen sulfide are located where there may be a possibility of exposure. The hydrogen sulfide alarms have blue flashing lights and an audible alarm. If the blue light goes off or you hear the alarm, use your escape respirator and evacuate the area immediately. Walk crossways to the wind direction, which can be determined by checking the stacks or windsocks, and go to your company's designated assembly area so all employees can be accounted for. This completes your contractor safety overview. We realize that ultimately safety is everyone's responsibility. Thank you for helping make the Fernandina Beach Mill a safe place for everyone.